true. Yeah, I suspect that's correct.
I was very surprised.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending tonight's board meeting. My name is Brad Gottschall, the Lower Paxton Township Manager, and in typical fashion, I will give a brief summary of tonight's agenda. So tonight, the board will recognize Jeffrey Connolly of the U.S. Census Bureau as he gives a presentation on the 2020 census and how the township fits into this very important process. Under old business, the board will consider action on Ordinance 19-03, which amends Chapter 165 of the Codified Ordinance, updating the township's solid waste and recycling ordinance. Then, moving into new business, the board will consider Resolution 19-09, allowing for certain reimbursements of township funds through bond proceeds. Next, the board will consider Ordinance 19-04, allocating building permits within the Beaver Creek Sanitary Sewer Drainage Basin. Then, finally, before acting on improvement guarantees and the payment of township and authority bills, the board will take into consideration the renewal of an agreement with Club Automation for licensing software out of the Friendship Center and Parks and Recreation Department. So with all that, the board is seated and prepared to begin. Thank you.
Thank you. Norm? I'll call this meeting of the Lower Paxton Township Board of Supervisors to order. I would like to ask everyone to please stand, and Mr. Zumas will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Zumas. We have before us approval of minutes of the meeting of February 5th, 2019. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve the minutes of February the 5th, 2019 as prepared and circulated.
So moved. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Before we head into public comment, I would like to report that the board did not meet in executive session prior to this meeting, but we will be meeting following this meeting to receive information from the township manager. With that, we will move to public comment for any items not on the agenda, but we will do that after we have a presentation on the 2020 census. It's a very important activity that's about to happen, and Mr. Connolly, if you would like to come to the podium and give us, the folks at home, a little bit of background on yourself and talk about why this census count is so important to Lower Paxton Township.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Jeff Conley. I'm a partnership specialist with the United States Census Bureau, and I am here assigned to Dauphin County to assist in the preparations for the upcoming 2020 census. Here with me as well is Miss Angela Gregg. She's in the audience right here, if you could wave to everybody. She is also a new hire. She just came on a week ago, and she's going to be working with us as well in Dauphin County. The purpose of my presentation is to inform everyone about the most impactful events, or one of the most impactful events that happens only once every 10 years, and to offer some ideas how this community can shape its future by responding to the 2020 census. So what is the census? There are 6 important things you need to know about the census. First, the decennial census is mandated by Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution, with the first one that was conducted back in 1790. So this thing has been around for a very long time. The second thing is that the census is used to apportion the 435 voting seats in the House of Representatives. And then next, it also is used for legislative redistricting at the federal, state, and local levels. This redistricting will happen in the year 2021 in April, following next year's census. One of the most important things, though, of the census is that it determines the annual distribution of $675 billion in federal funding to the states and local programs, of which Pennsylvania currently receives around $27 billion. So it's about 2/3 of the Pennsylvania budget we're talking about here. State and local governments also use this information to support the grant applications for federal programs. And then lastly, the information is used to help governments, businesses, organizations to help with their future planning. So it's quite an important event that we're talking about here. The bottom line is that with the census, the goal is to count everyone once, only once, and in the right place. So if you live in any capacity in Lower Paxton Township for the majority of your year, then when we do the 2020 census, you should be counted right here in Lower Paxton Township. Okay, so in the census community, we have a tagline. It's safe, it's easy, and it's important. It's safe in respect that our data storage and IT systems are the gold standard for privacy protection. In addition to strong security layers, we use a capability called differential privacy, whereby gray noise is inserted to the data stream, making it virtually impossible for hackers to get into and interpret our information. The Census Bureau also has a legal mandate to protect confidentiality, which we'll talk about in the next slide. It's easy. The census has never been easier to take. This coming census is going to be the first time that we actually employ the online census capability. There's only about 10 questions in the census, so you can literally use your smartphone, go online, answer the 10 questions, and be done with the census survey in a few short minutes. And then, as I said, it's very important. As I stated earlier, the results of the census determines not only the size of the congressional representation for each state, but it also is the amount of funding that each state receives every year for the next 10 years. So we often get a lot of questions about whether the stored information is protected. All responses are protected by Title 13 of the U.S. Code and remain confidential for 72 years. No other federal agency, to include the President of the United States, has access to any respondent's personal information. The only information that is available is summary information that you see in the form of analytics that we provide on the census website. So everything from like population demographics, age, education, businesses, and stuff like that. You get that in large numbers, but we will never have the ability to drill down to an individual household and tell anybody within the government this is who's living there and how many people are living there. As I said before, all records are remain confidential for 72 years under Title 44 of the U.S. Code. So if you go to the National Archives to look up ancestral information, for example, the only information that's accessible at this point in time is census information from 1940 and prior. So it's very safeguarded. Every census employee takes a lifetime oath to protect respondent information. So employees like myself, Angela, and the enumerators that are going to be on the streets in Lower Paxton Township next year are sworn to life to never divulge any personal information about anybody that responds to the survey. If we do, we can be held responsible and penalized up to 5 years imprisonment and face a $250,000 fine. So we take that oath very seriously. So how will the census be done? This is a broad overview in 4 major phases of the census, from the lower left over here all the way over to here. So follow this with me. Currently, the Census Bureau is partnering with local governments to conduct a thorough canvassing of addresses in every locality to ensure that we send the census surveys to the right places. So when we mail out the census, we're going to send them to addresses, not individuals. And so what we're doing right now is we're working with local governments to go out, understand through like databases that are already available where the addresses are. But for some addresses that are difficult to locate, we work with the local governments. And when we can't figure out exactly where the address is, we'll send people out to the neighborhoods and actually physically look for the addresses. So while that's happening concurrently, we also are in the process of teaming with local organizations like the Board of Supervisors here in Lower Paxton Township to educate and motivate the people into taking action in 2020. This involves a number of things, one of which, and this is very important, is establishing a complete count committee, which we'll talk about shortly. But the U.S. Census Bureau also provides information throughout our communities through an outreach program that we have. We conduct activities in every community to help raise awareness. We host information sharing through our website. If you ever have a chance, go check out the census.gov website. It's a wealth of knowledge. And then towards the August timeframe, we provide schools and teaching faculty with a program called Statistics in Schools. It's a great program. It's a whole library of lesson plans. Covers history, geography, math, sociology, English, and it includes warm-up activities, lesson plans, everything a teacher needs to use in order to educate kids using the census information that we have. The next phase of the campaign is when we actually get out and count the population. And so this begins in mid-March with the survey notifications going to all addresses and opening the online option to everybody. So in the middle of March, we'll send out postcards to everybody saying the census is about to begin, but we'll also open up the online option for people if they want to go in and complete it a little bit early. April 1st, as you know, is officially Census Day when all census options are available. So at that time, we'll not only have the online option, but you can do it by mail. You can do it by calling a toll-free number. And then by June and July, if we have not had a complete response, we will send people out by foot to knock on doors to those people that have not yet responded to the census so that we can hopefully capture those numbers as well. And then finally, by December, the results of the census are going to be tabulated and forwarded according to law to the president, and then eventually they get released a couple months later so that the redistricting process can happen in the April timeframe in 2021. So that's basically the overarching concept and the timeline of the census for 2020. So let's talk about why all this is important to the citizens of Pennsylvania and Lower Paxton Township. As I stated earlier, the distribution of federal funding is based off of census count. According to the Pennsylvania Department of Community and Economic Development, about $27 billion of Pennsylvania budget is derived from federal funding. That's about 2/3 of the budget. This money is also part of 16 federal programs that supply aid to like Medicaid, Medicare, SNAP, highway construction projects, transportation projects, education. I think Pennsylvania Department of Education manages about $700 million worth of federal funding, and then health services, and a number of other programs that make up this dollar amount. So it's very important to the welfare of everybody in this community. Okay, so this next slide is basically a recap, going back to apportionment. Okay, this is the 2010 results and how the House of Representatives seats were reapportioned. What you see is a number of colors here, and what I'll do is explain each. All of these gray states right here, when they did the 2010 census, their populations did not change significantly enough to result in a gain or a loss of a House of Representatives seat. However, you see these blue states over here, light blue, dark blue, almost violet. These are the states that are gaining seats through the census process. So in 2010, for example, Texas gained four House of Representatives seats. Those that are in light green and dark green, including Pennsylvania, are the ones that have lost seats in this process in the 2010 census. Pennsylvania in 2010 lost 1 seat. Pennsylvania has been on a decline in House of Representatives seats since 1940, when we had 33 seats, and then as of this last census, we had 18 seats left. So, go ahead, go to the next slide, please. So this slide provides a snapshot of how Dauphin County has performed in the past and how it is predicted to perform in the upcoming census. As you can see, the participation rate for Dauphin County between 2000 and 2010 declined by 5%. That's these numbers over here. So in 2000, Dauphin County had a turnout of 86% participants, but that dropped a good 5% in 2010. Okay? So this means that currently, of the estimated 275,000 residents in this county, over 50,000 did not take the census in one way or another. So that's a significant number. Now, if you think about it in terms of the over $2,000 per person for the next 10 years, you're talking about almost $1 billion of potential federal funding. And we're talking about the $2,093 that I showed you on the previous slide. Next is the low response score. If you could go back to that real quick. The low response score, as we call it in the Census Bureau, the LRS, is a prediction of how the municipality will likely perform during the next census if no efforts are made to educate and motivate the population. This is computed based off of historically low mail-in responses of certain segments of the population. So as we know through basically our past experiences, there are parts of your demographics that traditionally have not fared well in responding to the census, okay? So in Dauphin counties, the estimated average low response score is 20.5% going into the 2020 census. So what it's saying basically is we have a potential of repeating a undercount of 50,000 plus citizens in the Dauphin County area. So this is very important. So there's an opportunity for winners and losers in this next 2020 census. All right. So the most important question I can answer tonight is, what can Lower Paxton Township do in the upcoming 2020 census? The short answer is you can educate and motivate your residents so that they rally in the 2020 census and increase the congressional representation and federal funding for the Commonwealth. A complete count committee is the tool that we recommend to large municipalities like Lower Paxton Township to fulfill this goal. This committee is made up of trusted voices throughout the area who can educate everyone to participate in the census survey. So what you have here is just a basic sampling of the types of people that you may wish to put on your committee when you proclaim one. You've got everything from nonprofit organizations. Faith-based organizations are a great way to get out to people in hard-to-reach places, hard-to-count populations. Your veterans groups. So there's, you've got the American Legions out there, the VFWs. Those are the types of organizations where you may wish to have a representative on your committee. But the bottom line is that you know your demographics better than anybody else. So when you develop a complete count committee, you should look at the variations in your personal demographics and specifically look towards the areas that present the highest possibility of a low response score. And those should be, the areas where you seek the type of leaders that can speak to those populations. And the other thing is that the township should consider implementing an outreach strategy, which is usually implemented through the Complete Count Committee. And when we talk about outreach strategies, we're not talking about an incredible amount of resources that we have to already add to, a very, exhausted budget as it is, I'm assuming. But you're talking about leveraging your existing social media, your newsletters. We have a great information campaign that we offer through the Census Bureau that allows us to help you in getting information out about why it's important, that it's safe, that it's easy, that it's important, and that every single person counts. So you use your social media platforms, your newsletters. School kicks off in the late August timeframe, so there's the statistics in schools, which is a great way to communicate the census and what it does. And then there's special activities and events. The idea of like scheduling certain things around existing events that you have scheduled on your calendar, or in some cases doing census-exclusive rallies and festivals and stuff like that. So those are just some ideas. Okay. So in summary, the residents of Lower Paxton Township have an opportunity to shape the future by participating in the 2020 census. The results will have lasting effects for the next 10 years, and there will be winners and losers depending on how communities prepare for this upcoming event. So the only other thing I'll share with you before I entertain any questions is that the Census Bureau is currently also looking for people in your community to hire to be part of the force that's going to help us get through the 2020 census. For those of you that are interested, we have our website right here. It says 2020census.gov/jobs. Please feel free to look at that, and we'd be more than happy to have a few of you on board on our team. So with that, board members, if you have any questions or anybody in the audience, I'll be happy to entertain them. Yes, sir.
You had mentioned previous about best practices, and I was wondering if any schools have put this into their curriculum to educate all the students who could take it home to their parents.
They have, and with great success. It's a very creative product, and when we get finished with the meeting, I'll show you if you have some time. It's a well-developed website. On the website, they literally have like all the lesson plans already prepared for the teachers. So there's no heavy lifting on the teachers' part. And those lesson plans are already accompanied with student guides. So the package is already prepared. In fact, there's even videos and stuff like that that you can pull off to help the teachers understand how the program works and everything. But the intent of the program is to get the kids to actually get into the census data and actually see how powerful and informative that information is, not only for making key decisions about future budget, but also for planning into the future. So yeah, it's a great product.
And then the second question is more a curiosity question. How do you handle like the Harrisburg mission? Where you have intransients that come in and don't stay for a long period of time. How are they accounted?
We spent a lot of time prior to the 2020 census in getting groups of people out there and stakeholders in that profession, like some of the nonprofits, to help us identify where folks that are transient, folks that are homeless, are spending most of their time. During the census, we will actually go to those places, whether it's a homeless shelter, a mission, in some cases, some remote places where people are deciding that they're going to live from day to day, and we will get the information from them, assuming that they'll cooperate. But we do, we have a thing called Group Quarter, which is a part of the normal operation that we do to prepare for the 2020 census, and a lot of that heavy lifting happens in that part of the operation.
Thank you.
Jeff, you had said about living part of the time in Lower Paxton. So how many months, if someone should ask the question, how many months should they live in Lower Paxton to actually complete the census that they live here?
That's a good question. As I understand, the general rule of thumb is that if they spend most of their time, which I would assume is over 50% of the time, in Lower Paxton Township, then they should be reporting themselves in the census, at least, as a resident of the household in which they're living. So we have that question all the time because we obviously have families that, where kids go to college. A kid's family may be living in Ohio, but he's going to, Penn State, Harrisburg. Well, for the census, if they're spending their full time at Harrisburg, at the Harrisburg campus of Penn State, and their families in Ohio, they'll still be counted at Penn State, Harrisburg, because of the idea that all of the facilities, infrastructure, and everything that we pay into is being used by that individual at that point in time. So that's kind of like the rule of thumb. I'll have to get back to you and see if there is like a legal definition of what that means, but the rule of thumb is if they spend most of their time in a certain place, that's where they should be counted.
So could the parents also, and the census happens in Ohio, could they also put them down there? I mean, if they're not communicating and
Yes.
the child fills it out here and then they fill it out in Ohio, so it could be two places for one person. Does that happen?
Yes, it does. And what you'll see is that in the census questionnaire, they actually have a set of operational questions, is what they call them at the end. And what those questions attempt to do in part is to deconflict that. So they'll ask about that son, for example, that happens to be away at college, and they'll specifically ask, are they living here or are they living in college? So it'll kind of differentiate, and then that'll be the coin flip at that time,
Okay.
But there is some questions that focus on things like, are they away at college? Are they in the military? And so when the college student is at Penn State Harrisburg answering their survey, and the families back home answering their survey, the two, when they come together, will be deconflicted, and they'll only count
Oh, okay.
at the college.
Okay.
So,
Great,
and
thank you.
there is a process that happens within the database where, if two names of the same dates of birth come up, it'll do
Oh,
some
okay. So
process of
that's how-
deconfliction and make a decision.
Thank you.
Jeffrey, a couple questions. Since obviously you've been through this before, what are other communities doing in terms of putting their, I'll call it the census team, together for their community? I mean, I understand that you want people that will reach out, to the faith-based, nonprofit organizations, but I'm going beyond that. Do you, as an agency, reach out to specifics? And don't misunderstand me here, but such places such as the jails, the shelters, retirement communities, or again, are all of those still left on our shoulders to include as we touch base with these groups? I mean, I understand the parts. For us, it's easy for things like National Night Out to contact our representative at the mall to set things up, at that point, or a retired teachers association within the county that covers all and even running in our National Night Out actually have booths set up where with laptops where people can stop and they can actually do it. That sort of thing, that part is easy. I'm just wondering, because of the need to touch base with everyone, jail would not be one that people would normally think of.
Yes.
Or a shelter, or I'm thinking of an agency here within our community where abused women will move in with small children because they have no place else to go until that organization can find them, help them find a job, find a home. But again, that's an agency that could be quickly and very easily overlooked. Mm-hmm. But again, is that things we have to consider, or are there tentacles from your agency that touch some of those government, or even Dauphin County Children and Youth, that have many, many groupings?
Yes.
And I know that's giving you a wide question.
No,
but I don't. But I also need to know if you can help us so that we establish correct parameters, and there are not groups or agencies that are overlooked either by us or by you.
Yes. To start off, I'll preface everything by saying this is somewhat just as complicated in my mind as it is to yours.
Okay.
But I will say that what I've seen so far is that you've got a network of people that are all focused on the success of the census in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. The first, I think, the one entity that has gotten off to a good start is your State Complete Count Commission. And so when you talk about certain special entities within your demographics that you may need some assistance in either getting a point of contact or getting some type of action to make sure that that population or that segmented population is covered, the State Complete Count Commission is probably right now the most effective tool you can do to network with. Because the way it's working is that we're all in this together. The census wants to see everybody succeed. Pennsylvania's State Complete Count Commission is there to make sure that Commonwealth of Pennsylvania succeeds. And then, of course, you're here getting ready to stand up your Complete Count Committee, wanting your specific area to succeed as well. So we're all kind of working as a network together. And the reason why I point you towards the State Complete Count Commission is because they have a better representation of all the different functions throughout the state. They're very robust right now, and when we get finished this meeting, what I'll do is I'll make sure that I email you some contact information of Norman Colon. He's the executive director that's been appointed under Governor Wolf, and he's been moving out very fast, very rapidly, and he's very excited to work with the local municipalities. So I think that's probably, if you do have a situation where you're dealing either with a unique shelter, a corrections facility, or something like that, then our first stop would probably be to see if he has somebody within his committee, or as we call it, the commission, that can help facilitate the relationship building within the township.
And Jeff, a specific one that I would use would be our Dauphin County Library System. Now, that's county-wide, but here within Lower Paxton Township, we have one of those branches. So I certainly would not want to duplicate services, but by the same token, within our township, we have one of those branches that could, in fact, through its own county-wide advertising, you can stop in at your local library and there's someone there on a volunteer basis. I mean, volunteers, because the library has volunteers, that would be able to sit there from 9 to 3 or whatever, 11 to 2. If you stop in, they will help you do this. Again, that would make the connection for Lower Paxton since we have one of the branches. But again, because the county is, or because the library is county-wide, there's in Hummelstown, up in Dauphin, and et cetera, et cetera. So I don't want to duplicate, but by the same token, I want to make certain that we do proper outreach.
Well,
and maybe this gentleman you're talking about would be able to help us with that. So we are doing our due diligence.
Well, the one thing we'll definitely commit to as partnership specialists is that we get out and pollinate the whole area as much as possible with our message. So if we run into somebody at the county commissioner's office that may be of an advantage to you as you stand up your complete count committee, and there's an opportunity to gain some synergy by connecting, your point of contact and their point of contact, we'll certainly do that. I mean, that's our primary function, is to make sure that all of the efforts towards the census are being networked properly. One of the things, we have been up to the county, by the way, and we're in discussions right now with the commissioner's office about the potential of there being a complete count committee in Dauphin County. So those discussions are a little bit premature right now, so we don't know exactly which direction they're going to go in, but they certainly have voiced an interest and they understand the importance of the 2020 census. So I foresee, the resources that we have available at the county as far as having a good point of contact with the county library system and stuff. I think that they're going to be in with this, and I think there'll be an opportunity to leverage them. What we're trying to do with complete count committees is we're first looking at the larger entities in the Commonwealth to start them. Because if we can economize the effort of smaller townships and boroughs by having them maybe send representatives to the larger effort, then they can do a lot with the little resources they have by leveraging other people's resources. So we're trying to work our way from the top down so that ultimately, if there's a way to economize the effort as we work our way down to, the individual in each township, we'll leverage that.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions from board members? Any public questions? Well, I'm going to jump ahead just a little bit here. We do have a proclamation. What we have been asked to do is to have a proclamation that will allow us to set up this complete count committee. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'll read just a little bit of it so you can get an idea. And the proclamation reads, "Be it hereby proclaimed that whereas every 10 years, beginning in 1790, as mandated by the United States Constitution, the census of population and housing has been taken by the U.S. government to count all persons and housing units in the United States, to reapportion the membership of the U.S. House of Representatives among the states and for other purposes. Now therefore be it proclaimed that the Board of Supervisors of Lower Paxton Township hereby recognizes the importance of the decennial census and commits to preparing all residents and community members for the 2020 census. And be it further proclaimed that Lower Paxton Township will work with community organizations to establish a complete count committee comprised of community leaders representing educational, faith-based, business, nonprofit, and local government organizations, as well as representatives from historically undercounted populations." And with that, is there a motion that we approve this proclamation and begin the process of organizing our complete count committee?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
It has been moved by Mr. Chrisman. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Zumas. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. We're officially underway.
All righty.
Thank you for being here, and we look forward to working with you.
Yes, sir. Me too.
And Brad, I would think maybe one of the first things we're going to want to do is get with the folks who are organizing National Night Out. We still have, about 7 weeks or so before National Night Out. So it might be a good inaugural community outreach effort there.
Yes, sir.
Start informing people. And we have time to actually get it put together. So,
And since I sit on Dauphin County Library Board, I will mention it to them ahead of time.
Wonderful.
very good.
All righty. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
I think somebody in the audience has a
Oh, yeah.
question.
Oh, you have a question?
Yeah, just one question. Jeff, just a question for you. If I remember correctly, you said in Dauphin County, our participation rate was about 81%. So that's almost 20 out of every 100 people who did not respond for one reason or another. What do we believe the major causals, the top 3 causals are for any population of not responding for what you have seen?
Jeff, could you go to the podium and then restate the question so folks who are watching will? Jeff and Jeff. We have Jeff.
It's Jeff squared.
Go ahead, if you'd like to.
Jeff can restate the question to Jeff.
Jeff Klein. Question for you. You had mentioned that in Dauphin County, with the last census, we had about 81% participation rate. So assuming that was an ongoing number, we would have about 20 out of every 100 folks would not be responding. from all the analytics that we've done in the prior censuses, what do we believe the top 3 or 4 causes are for people not responding to that to help us take better action on maybe being able to target those things?
Sure. So there's a number of reasons, and I don't know if I can sum them up in top 3. When we talk about low response score, that has a lot to do with the types or categories of people that tend to be undercounted. That does not necessarily mean that we're talking about people who choose not to respond to the census. These, for example, can be, we have a category under ages 4 and under children are one of those hard to count categories, and that's because a number of reasons. Either for one reason or another, the family doesn't count them, or they're in a situation with 2 parents in different locations and neither one of them counts them. And there's a number of other reasons. So you have that as a part of that percentage that doesn't respond. We have a challenge with people over 65 for some reason, and there's a number of reasons behind that. We have one of the growing problems that we're going to be dealing with in particular in 2020 is that there's a growing anti-government sentiment out there. And so you do have those types of people that will actually say, I refuse to participate in this because I don't trust the government. So you have, over a dozen reasons why those numbers don't get counted, partly because people make that, the judgment that I'm not going to participate in the census, but there's a lot of people that just slip between the cracks. And so, again, you can't possibly get to 100% because we know what we know about the results. But what we're trying to do with the robust effort of educating and motivating is getting to each and every one of those people that can, in fact, and will respond to the survey, because we get past any problems that they've had previously with the census, whether it's antitrust of the government or whatever you might consider. So it's hard to categorize in top 3. We do have information that kind of can educate you on a broader level as to all the different complexities that lead to a lesser percentage, and we'll get that information to you if you'd like.
Jeff, I wanted to do a follow-up. Jeff, I appreciated the question because I was waiting to hear what those areas were that did not respond, and the only one that I heard specifically was over 65. So if that was one of the variables that caused that lack of response, then I would tend to think that should be on the high priorities for attack methodology as we approach that. Therefore, for me, if that's true, then one of the areas that we really want to concentrate on are senior centers.
Yes, absolutely.
But again, I only heard that one, and I don't know if there are any more or not.
So and that's, and without carrying forward this lengthy discussion in this forum, there is a lot of analytics that are going to inform you as a complete count committee as to who those populations are. So when we get into the process of talking about who perhaps you should have on your complete count committee, we're going to drill down into the low response score. And you remember the map had like blue colors, green colors, yellow colors. Those are telling you where specifically your problem areas are going to be. Those also align with certain demographics. You have a growing diverse population that's here, some of which needs to be more comfortable with responding to the census. So as we get into like the analysis part of what you can do to be successful in 2020, we're going to provide more information about specifically where you've struggled in the past with those demographics that make your challenge a little bit different perhaps than Swatara Township.
And that's fine, because as long as we have those kind of statistics and analysis data, then it gives us a much better idea of how to form an action plan that will attack those areas of weakness last time and become a strength this time.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Jeff, I have 2 more questions I just thought of. You had said about 50,000 did not participate 10 years ago in Dauphin County. Do you have approximately what did not participate in Lower Paxton of that 50,000?
I can give you more specific data. Just to clarify, the number 50,000 was based off of an estimate based off of our current estimated population. So like back in 2010, the estimated population I think was more like 268,000. So the non-participation rate might be much smaller. But we can get you those numbers, and then we can get you some more specifics. What makes our data somewhat unique is that when we look at an area, the Census Bureau tracks data by census tracts, and those tracts don't align perfectly with the township boundaries. And so when we start rolling up our sleeves and actually getting into like analyzing why certain populations responded better, why certain neighborhoods didn't respond so well, we'll actually take the tools that we have online and we'll go specifically down into those areas and bring up the data, the percentages, the diversity, the ages, and you'll have it all at your disposal to make some analysis and some assumptions about what you need to do differently.
Okay.
So Jeff, will we have that data prior to our setting up our team of people?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, I was going to say I would hope so, because we need to have the assessment to know where the weaknesses are, to find the strengths to meet those, and the challenges that we will be facing to overcome. Okay.
Yes,
Okay,
absolutely.
then my other question is, I had asked you this when you originally presented, the Social Security number. I had asked, if you don't put the Social Security number down, is that counted as a census or no?
The answer is we don't ask for the Social Security number.
Oh, okay, because we had asked that.
We went
few
back
months-
and we
okay.
looked at the questionnaire, we looked
Okay.
at the proposed questions, and then we looked at most of our important talking points at the national capital and that.
Okay,
We don't.
well, that's
we
good
don't,
to know. Okay, great, thank you.
That is good to know. Very good. Well, if we have folks who may be watching tonight and are interested in helping us as part of the Complete Count Committee, you'll want to reach out to, I assume, Mr. Godshall to begin with, or have we designated a staff person yet to run point on this?
Not at this point, no.
Well, we will shortly. Otherwise, you'll be doing it. So we probably will shortly, right? Very good. Well, thank you for your time tonight. I appreciate your being here.
Thank you.
A very important activity that we're about to undertake. So you're going to be hearing a lot more about it in coming days and weeks. At this point, do we have other public comment? Mr. Murphy. Of course. We
Of course.
look forward to hearing what the Historical Commission is up to.
Joe Murphy, Lower Paxton Township Historical Commission. And it is the first meeting of the month, which means our meeting is Thursday. And we would like your audience to come out to this room on Thursday at 6:30. We're going to do 2 presentations this month. The first one will be on St. Thomas UCC Church and the Winrick Cemetery. A lot of the early history of Lower Paxton Township started in that part of the township. And we're going to give some of the history of the church, but the big thing is who's buried in the cemetery. It's amazing some of the roots that started in that cemetery that stretched all the ways to the White House. And that's all I'm going to say about that. The other thing is we've talked about the Masonic home and orphanage that was across the street from St. Thomas UCC, and a local artist has drawn a picture of the home. She interviewed some local residents who actually were at the home and actually saw the home. In fact, one of the men delivered ice to the home, and he told her what it was like. She got a tour of the area. A gentleman who grew up in the area, rode the bus to Lower Paxton High School, told her how the roads went back in those days, and she did quite a sketch for us. And later this year, she's actually going to do a painting. But she's going to present that this year, and hopefully some of the people that told her what it looked like will be there. So Thursday should be very exciting. So I hope that people in the audience can get out to our affair and enjoy some of the history. Thank you.
Thank you. A little bit of a tease there to find
Yes,
out what
indeed
was
it
going on. You've gotten really good at catching people's interest with these little comments. So we'll see where it leads to the White House. Any other public comment on an item not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to chairman and board member comments. Board members, do you have any comments this evening?
I do. Mr. Zumas, Mr. Judd, and myself participated in the Memorial Day Parade with the float, and yes, we did walk. We did not ride the float. And yesterday, I represented the board and the township at the grand opening of the Mid-Penn Bank, right across from the old Kmart. And luckily for us, they decided to stay in the township, so they moved from Allentown Boulevard up to Jonestown Road. So welcome to Mid-Penn Bank.
Any other board member comments?
Just a quick one, Joe. You can tell Mrs. Murphy that I'm a proud, caring member of the Gingerbread Club. I got my membership card today.
What number are you?
Oh, yeah.
I didn't see a number on it.
Yeah.
Hey,
Because somebody in the room is number 2.
Somebody in this room is number 2 and out after number 1. So,
I'm number 1.
no, you weren't the number 1.
Then I'm number 3.
Unfortunately, number 1 now keeps referring to me as number 2, and I'm not quite sure that's a name that I really want to go
If you're,
by.
Loman, if you're 2, I have to be 3. Am I 3, Joe? I'm 3.
Great,
Okay.
all right. Well, congratulations on being a member.
I got to go back and look and see what number.
See what number you are. And if folks wonder what's up there, it's the Chris Kindles Mart that's being planned for December. And certainly there's a Facebook page on that. And we would encourage people to look at that. We're going to have fun. It's
The
gonna be a fun
exact date,
time.
Joe, December
14th,
4th.
14th.
December 14th.
Joe, can you tell us again what the name of the committee is? Lower Paxton
Lower Paxton Community Foundation.
Community Foundation.
Yeah, the foundation was recently formed. This is one of their first activities. So we're gonna have a great December around here between that and the tree lighting
Yes.
and everything. But let's enjoy summer first. So
Absolutely.
And no snow, please.
yeah, no snow. Managers report. We've had no snow in the last month, I assume. Although with the way the weather's been.
Yeah. No, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, other than an exceptionally busy past couple of weeks, I have nothing else to report.
Okay, great.
I like succinct reports.
I love that, yes. Okay, we will now proceed to old business. We have one item under old business, and this is proposed ordinance number 19-03. This would amend Chapter 165 of the Codified Ordinances, further regulating curbside disposal practices and hazardous waste collection. Mr. Godshall.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, if you will remember, a number of meetings ago, we had the first reading of this ordinance, an ordinance that came as a suggestion from DEP, basically just to allow the township to update our solid waste and recycling ordinance, which hadn't been done in a number of years. But just briefly as a follow-up to that first meeting on this ordinance, just in response to Mr. Judd's question regarding bulk containers, those containers referred to as bulk containers are merely just dumpster-style containers. So there is no other real meaning behind that. But so then at this point, the ordinance had been advertised. The solicitor has reviewed the ordinance, and it is before the board for adoption tonight. And I believe Mr. Stein is...
And we're going to do a public hearing on this first.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a time and date set for the public hearing on ordinance 19-03. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to be heard on this ordinance? Don't all speak at once. Seeing no response, Mr. Chairman, it would be in order at this time to close the public hearing on ordinance 19-03, and the board may take action if it so desires.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stein. Is there a motion to approve ordinance 1903?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve ordinance 2019-03, which amends Chapter 165 of the Codified Ordinances, further regulating curbside disposal practices and hazardous waste collection as recommended by Mr. Gutschall, which I also know that is part of the recommendation coming from DEP, so it's pretty much a mandatory kind of thing.
Is there a second to Mr. Chrisman's motion?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any board member questions or comments?
Mr. Stein, can you is it just 165 that they changed? What has been changed or has been added?
To this particular ordinance?
Yes.
First of all, the biggest change, I think, is they added hazardous waste, the hazardous waste issue into it. Now we're responsible for enforcing federal and state regulations and statutes on hazardous waste handling. So that's...
So it's everything under Article 1?
Yes, that's
Okay,
correct.
That's what I wanted to know.
And
Thank you.
there are some changes in some of the other parts, but that's the most comprehensive change, I think, is adding
The
that
hazardous
particular
waste.
part of it. Yeah.
Okay.
Any additional questions? Any public question or comment? Seeing none, all in favor of approving ordinance 2019-03 as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Okay, we'll move on now to new business. And we have before us proposed resolution 2019-09. This would declare an intent to reimburse township expenditures through the issuance of bond proceeds. Mr. Godshall.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. In anticipation of the bond issuance this year, there are certain projects that will be part of such issuance that will require expenditure of township funds prior to the receipt of bond proceeds. So in order for the township to reimburse itself once the bond proceeds are in fact received, per IRS code, the board must declare its official intent to do so via resolution, which is what you see before you this evening. So it's a rather straightforward action on this typical resolution.
So we're going to be pledging to repay ourselves.
Correct.
Okay.
That's
I
important.
think we can be trusted to do that, yes. Therefore, is there a motion to approve Resolution 2019-09?
Mr. Henry, I think there's a mistake. It says, whereas the township of Lower, it's, Paxton is missing. The very first one, where it says, whereas the township of Lower, and then it says Dauphin County, Pennsylvania. Right under
In the
resolution.
very first line,
Yeah,
there's a typo.
yeah.
Whereas the township of.
It should be
Of
Lower
Lower
Paxton.
Paxton, yeah.
Yeah, it just needs to
Okay,
have Lower
I just want to
Paxton.
bring it to, okay,
We want to add Paxton in there,
Yeah.
yes.
Yes.
okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve Resolution 2019-09, declaring the intent to reimburse the township expenditures through the issuance of bond proceeds with the correction of Lower Paxton being inserted into the resolution.
So moved. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. Any additional board member questions or comments? Any public questions or comments? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Anybody opposed? So approved. That brings us to proposed ordinance 2019-04. This has to do with the allocation of building permits in the Beaver Creek Sanitary Sewer Drainage Basin. And I see we have Mr. Weaver with us. Good evening, Mr. Weaver.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'll stay at the staff table today because this is a pretty brief ordinance description. This ordinance has been established since 1995, as the board may recall. Building permits are authorized by the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection and SWATERA. We have a settlement agreement with SWATERA. Each March 15th, the authority has to send a letter requesting additional permits. GHD, as the authority engineer, has to provide proof that we're in compliance with the DEP consent decree and the settlement agreement. That letter was sent on March 1st. We received a letter from SWATERA Township Authority on March 21st authorizing the permits to be issued from April 1st, 2019 to March 31st, 2020 for the full amount of 168 permits. In addition, in accordance with the settlement agreement, there's surplus permits that are to be allocated on a ratio of 60% for the developer petitioners and 40% for the developers and individuals. Therefore, the developer petitioners shall be allocated 199 permits, and the developers and other individuals 132 permits. I'll be happy to answer any questions the board has.
Looks pretty straightforward to me.
That is straightforward.
Hearing Mr. Stein?
Indeed.
Go ahead.
Indeed.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And Mr. Weaver, I'm assuming you're recommending we approve this.
I am. Staff recommends approval of ordinance 19-04. Sorry.
With that recommendation, Mr. Chairman,
We have to hold the
we have
hearing
to,
first.
we have to have the hearing. I'm sorry, Mr.
This is time and date set for the public hearing on ordinance 19-04, which involves the allocation of building permits in the Beaver Creek Sanitary Sewer Drainage Basin. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to be heard on ordinance 19-04? Seeing no response, Mr. Chairman, it would be in order at this time to close the public hearing on ordinance 19-04, and the board may take action if it so desires.
Gary scared off all the public comment, so would you like to go ahead with the motion?
Sure. Mr. Chairman, I move we approve ordinance 2019-04, which is the allocation of the building permits in the Beaver Creek Sanitary Sewer Drainage Basin as prepared and recommended by Mr. Weaver.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any additional board member questions or comments? Any public questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed?
Thank you.
So done. Thank you, Mr. Weaver. And now we're going to put the ball back in Mr. Godshall's court because we have action on a renewal agreement for licensing the club automation system for the Parks and Recreation Department and the Friendship Community Center.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Board members, this software package has been utilized in the Friendship Center and by the Parks and Rec Department for the past 3 years now, allowing members, residents, and other users to make payments, register for programming, reserve parks and facilities, and interact with the department online. The software also acts as the internal backbone for the department, handling things like tracking of financials and scheduling and things such as that. So the solicitor at this point has reviewed the agreement, and the center and Parks and Rec Department recommend approving the renewal proposal in front of the board this evening, which represents a 2% increase year over year on the previous agreement. After the flat 2-year period in the first 2 years. So we were able actually to work with Club Automation to bring down the pricing quite a bit from their first proposal through some negotiating. So I think this represents a good deal for the township.
Okay. Any questions or comments?
Mr. Gutschall, I may have missed, is this a 2-year contract, did I hear you say?
No.
Is it yearly?
Mr. Chrisman, no, it is actually a 6-year contract.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I missed that somewhere. And again, I'm sure you're recommending because, at least I assume you were recommending because our experience with them in the past has been successful and the operation is working very well between the company itself and our staff.
I am not typically a fan of such long contracts, particularly of 6 years, but given the fact that there was a large initial capital expenditure to bring the software package on board, coupled with the fact that we've only been using it for 3 years,
Right.
and it's been going very well, yes, I do recommend the 6-year renewal.
So, Mr. Stein, I assume you are recommending this as well?
I am.
Okay.
I just had a question, Brad. We were using Dallas Systems for some software. Were they contacted to bid on this or no?
Yeah, Mrs. Lindsay, I'm not sure who exactly had been contacted initially to put in a bid. I'd have to get back to you on that, but
Okay. I was just curious because we've used them over the past couple of years, and I was wondering if they had a chance to look at this also, because we do use them for a lot of software
do.
here at the township.
we do.
And they are in Pennsylvania, where I noticed this is in Alabama.
Yes, I do know the software that deals specifically with, rec center automation and things like that is more of a nuanced and niche market. I don't know if Dallas would have something that would be able to perform that function, but I'd have to get back to you on that one.
Okay.
I think I'm having a bit of a problem with a 6-year contract.
that's
I
a
mean, if we
long-
were to hypothetically turn operation of the Friendship Community Center over to another entity or privatize it in some way, are we going to be stuck with a contract that we can't get out of that we're going to have to pay? I mean, not that that's on the horizon, but there are always discussions.
Is our separation?
Yeah, I'm a little concerned about 6 years.
Well, and I'd personally like Dallas to take a look at to see what they could offer also, because we use them for mostly all of our software here in the township.
Good point.
Yeah.
Well,
Mr. Chair, if I may, I had originally actually approached Club Automation about actually initially a 2-year contract or a 3-year contract. They didn't have anything lower. They had 3-year and above. They had nothing lower than that. I pushed pretty heavily to get to that because I agree. I'm not typically a fan of long-term contracts. So I think 3 was the least amount they can do, and the year-over-year increase that they were proposing for a 3-year, I believe, was somewhere in the vicinity of 6%. And as a software as a service, which that's what this particular package is. It's web-based software as a service. I did not feel comfortable bringing the board a 6% software as a service,
Right.
agreement renewal. So, I could certainly try to go back to them and
I think
tighten
we
the
should,
screws,
I think
but-
we should go, I would prefer 2 years. I think I could accept 3 because I don't really foresee anything occurring in a 3-year period. 6 years is a long time to be locked into something. I mean, if we could get it at 2% for 2 or 3 years, that I think would be better. If they don't want to do that, maybe we should look at alternatives.
Well,
Robin has suggested
yeah,
one.
I think we should really look at Dallas also,
Okay,
just to see if they offer the same automation that this company does.
I would agree.
Yeah.
The reduction of time obviously will have an impact on the amount of money. Obviously, we can get at a lower rate at 6. I'm not advocating 6 years. I'm just simply saying the longer we take the contract, the lower the rate would be, and I'm sure that's in part why it's being presented. The thing I'm unable to find, Brad, and maybe you can help me, within the contract where it does talk about the severability in terms of, is it 30 days, is it 60 days, or does it have to be the full 6-year period, or we're in violation? And I maybe just was unable to locate it.
Mr. Crispin,
Yeah.
Mr. Stein, do you remember? Do you recall reading that provision? I can't place my mind on that particular.
Talking about a termination provision. I think there's a termination for cause, if I
for
recall
cause.
correctly. I don't know if there is one that you can terminate like after a year if you give X days notice or something like that. I don't remember, frankly, if there's one of those termination clauses in there.
I would be more susceptible to taking the 6-year to get the lower rate if I knew that after, let's say, of the 6-year contract, that within year 2, that we would be able to say within the 60 days that we desire to terminate.
Yes.
I mean, that way we would gain the lower rate, even though I know it's for 6 years, but we still have the out at the end of 2 to say within a 30 or 60 day notice that we would like to bring the contract to closure. So that might be another option for you to investigate and assess, please.
We may use them for 6 years, but we should have flexibility.
Exactly.
With that, I would suggest that we have a motion to table item C.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we table item 8C.
So moved. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Okay.
My next question is, when does I'm not finding it, when does it expire?
It actually had already expired. I was able to get an extension for a month because I told them I'd be bringing it back to the board. But this actually hit my desk rather late in the renewal cycle, and I mentioned to Club Automation that they have to really account for local government and how our meetings work, and so we're locked in. They extended it for a month, so.
At least they were
we-
flexible enough to understand governmental operations.
Okay. Let's move on to item D, the subdivision and land development plans, of which we have none. However, we do have improvement guarantees.
Mr. Chairman, may I just interrupt for one final thought?
Yes.
With coming back to our item that we were just discussing, Brad, would you be able to get more information and be able to share with us by next week again? And I think it would help us move forward because right now we don't have a contract, if you will, because we've lapsed, and that gives us an opportunity to make a decision what we're going to do rather than wait any longer. I would ask that we could have that answer by next week.
Yeah, we do have 2 meetings over the next 2 weeks.
Right,
There's
so we
plenty
should-
of time to, see what we want to do.
Right.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I just
Okay.
wanted to get that
No
clarified.
problem. Anybody have any questions, comments, issues with the improvement guarantees? Seeing none, is there a motion that we approve the improvement guarantees?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move that we approve the 8 improvement guarantees. I think there are 3 extensions, 2 reductions, 1 release, and 2 new ones.
No. 1, 2,
I think there's a total of 8.
There's eight.
yeah, 1, 2,
Mine is 6.
6?
Yeah, I have 8.
I have 8 on mine.
Members of the board, yeah, we added two additional ones later in the game. If you would refresh your page there, they
Shall I
should show
read
up.
them just to confirm? Shavoni, Kendall Oaks, 4301 Hilldale, 1001 Briersdale, 4129 Locust Lane, 2161 Crispin Villa, 4830 Londonderry, 2339 Abbey Lane.
Right, 8. Yours is only coming up with 6.
Yeah, I refreshed it twice.
Well, the last two ones are the Londonderry Road. Do you have 4830 Londonderry Road on your list?
Yes.
That's a reduction of the escrow, and 2339 Abbey Lane,
Is the
stormwater
release.
management plan release and escrow. So all are rather routine. Any questions or comments? So, Mr. Chrisman, you were in the process, I believe, of making the have you completed the motion?
I believe I did, but if not, I'll restate it. To improve the 8 improvement guarantees as presented and recommended by Mr. Gutschall.
So moved. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
That takes us to payment of bills of Lower Paxton Township and the Lower Paxton Township Authority. Madam Treasurer.
Yes, I make a motion, we pay the bills of Lower Paxton Township and Lower Paxton Township Authority.
So moved. Is there a second?
A second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Are there any additional announcements? The next meeting of the Board of Supervisors will be on Tuesday, June 11th at 7 p.m. That will be a workshop meeting right here in this room. With that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.